Honorable Minister of State, Budget and National Planning, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Finance, Permanent Secretary of Finance, Special Duties, Director, Budget Office of the Federation, DG, Debt Management Office, Chairman, FIRS, Acting Commissioner, NIACOM, Directors, Management and Staff of the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning, representatives of other MDAs that are here today, gentlemen of the press, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start by welcoming you to the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning, and thanking you for coming to address this important press briefing. You recall that His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari on the 9th of March 2020 set up a committee comprising some senior government officials, chaired by myself and with members, Honorable Minister of State Budget and Planning, Honorable Minister of State Petroleum Resources, Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, and the Group General Manager of the NNPC. Following the setting up of this committee, the committee was mandated to recommend fiscal measures to Mr. President for his consideration and approval. In this regard, the committee clearly recognized that Nigeria is currently facing significant fiscal risks due to the current global economic disruption caused by COVID-19 crisis, but also further aggravated by the decline in crude oil price, which has spiked our risk in the global financial market. Although similar challenges were experienced in 2008 and 2009, as well as in 2015 and 2016, Nigeria now has considerably lower fiscal buffers than in those previous economic downturns. The decline in international crude oil prices and domestic production may be magnified if a severe outbreak of COVID-19 occurs. Despite ongoing efforts to curtail the spread of the pandemic through compulsory lockdown of Lagos, Ogun, and the FCT, we still have to be very mindful that this can be aggravated. To directly address these health and economic challenges, the President has approved the following fiscal stimulus package as part of an integrated policy framework to ensure that Nigeria's healthcare system, fiscal position, and economy are sufficiently supported to weather these shocks. This fiscal stimulus package comprises measures as indicated, as I will be discussing now. But I want to indicate that there has been monetary measures that have already been announced by the Central Bank of Nigeria, and these are the first set of fiscal measures, and as the time goes on and the situation evolves, we'll be announcing more. So the President has approved the establishment of a 500 billion Naira COVID-19 Crisis Intervention Fund. The establishment of this fund will evolve and provide the much needed cash resources from various special accounts already existing in the Federation, and this is a process that we will be doing together with the National Assembly. We've already consulted with them, but there will be a need for them to pass a bill that allows us to take funds from some of the existing special accounts. This 500 billion Naira is proposed to be utilized for upgrading of healthcare facilities as earlier identified by the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 and already approved by Mr. President. 2, it will also include financing the federal government's interventions to support states in improving their healthcare facilities. 3, it will include the financing and the creation of special public works programs And 4, it will include funding any other additional interventions that may arise and that will subsequently be approved by Mr. President and, if necessary, also by the National Assembly. With regards to the special works programs, Mr. President has previously approved pilot special works programs in 8 states to be implemented by the National Directorate of Employment, the NDA. This approval was given in early this year, and the works were supposed to take place between February and April 2020, and I'd like to report that these works are currently ongoing. Mr. President has now approved that this program be extended to all 36 states and the FCT. The time frame for the implementation of this program will be determined by the MDAs that are responsible for the various pockets of programs that are agreed on. But the principle will be that in each of the 774 local governments, that there shall be created jobs of at least 1,000 persons per local government. The Federal Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning is also evaluating how best to extend the Special Works Program to provide modest stipends to workers to undertake road rehabilitation, social housing construction, urban and rural sanitation, health extension workers, and some other critical services. The intervention will be undertaken in conjunction with the Federal Ministries of Agriculture, Environment, Health, Works and Housing, and any other MDA where the critical works are required. Further details regarding the operations of the 500 billion COVID-19 Crisis Intervention Fund will be announced once the consultations with the National Assembly and the key ministries are concluded. There is also a need that has been identified now more than ever before to enhance financial support to the states for critical health care expenditure. The National Center for Disease Control, NCDC, has access to a regional disease surveillance system facility from the World Bank. This is a facility that is already existing in the sum of $90 million, out of which the NCDC has already drawn $8 million. We have requested to the World Bank to draw down the full balance of $82 million. The government has also requested for additional financing in the sum of $1 million from this same program to meet with the COVID-19 emergency needs in all of the 36 states of the Federation and the FCT, CDC, and the Federal Ministry of Health. This will enable us to expand the intensive care units, enhance laboratory capacity, accelerate procurement of test kits, and strengthen surveillance mechanisms, as well as improve information management. All of these activities are already budgeted for, in part by the Presidential Task Force for COVID-19 response, of which the President has approved a budget. But this facility from the World Bank will help us to cover more areas. We want to, at this point, deeply appreciate the support we have received so far from our partners at the World Bank. We are continuing our engagements with the World Bank, but also with the African Development Bank, the Islamic Development Bank, to access concessional funding to support the implementation of the 2020 budget, and also our capacity to respond adequately to the COVID-19 crisis and the decline of the crude oil prices. We have also applied to the International Monetary Fund for its COVID-19 rapid credit facility to draw from our existing holding within the World Bank IMF group. This loan will not be tied to any conditionalities. However, let me just state here and clarify that Nigeria does not intend to negotiate or enter into a formal program with the IMF at this time or in the foreseeable future. The COVID-19 Rapid Credit Facility with the IMF is a right for every member country that is a member of the IMF to draw up to the limit of the amount it has contributed, and Nigeria has expressed its interest to make such a drawing. The federal government has further approved 2.5 billion in resources to be directed to the healthcare sector. Of this 102.5 billion, 6.5 billion has already been released to the NCDC for critical expenditure. The federal government remains committed to supporting the states in these difficult times, particularly those states that are currently battling with the COVID-19 pandemic. Lagos State has already been provided with 10 billion naira in emergency funding. As the situation in the FCT and other states of the Federation evolve, the NCDC and the Federal Ministry of Health will make a determination and recommend funding support for any other state that has a critical need. To complement these initiatives, we are taking steps to activate and release, where necessary, enhanced hazard allowances provided in the remuneration structure of the federal health workers. The federal government enjoins the affected states to do the same. We take this opportunity to recognize the patriotism and the sacrifice of our frontline health workers, whose critical role in combating COVID-19 pandemic place their health and lives at risk. We thank all of you for your heroic efforts and to protect your which is undertaken to protect your fellow citizens from the disease and also from death. The federal government hereby assures our frontline health workers of adequate insurance, adequate compensation, and support during and in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic. Let me pause here to state that we will be engaging with the insurance industry to package special crisis healthcare insurance, which is life insurance for healthcare workers. Let me just give you some information regarding the state's FAC allocations and moratorium that we're seeking for debt repayment in respect of states as well as the federal government. Based on the fiscal assumptions underpinning the 2020 Appropriation Act, monthly federation account disbursements to the federal government and the state government is ideally projected to have been in the sum of 888 billion naira. However, due to the significant drop in international oil prices, FAC monthly disbursements had declined in recent months to 716.3 billion in January, 647.4 billion in February, and also further down to 581 billion in March 2020. Our experience shows that the monthly average FAC receipts should be at an average of at least 650 billion for the federal government and the state government to meet their current obligations in a healthy manner. Unfortunately, we project that monthly receipts may decline to as low as 400 billion over the next 3 to 6 months. To address these emerging fiscal risks, the President has approved that the sum of $150 million be withdrawn from the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority Stabilization Fund to support the June 2020 FAC disbursements. The Stabilization Fund was created for such emergencies and is to be utilized for this purpose. We are also exploring other options to augment FAC disbursements over the course of the fiscal year 2020. Mr. President has also approved that the NLNG should fast-track the disbursement of the dividend that is due to the Federation, and we're expecting these disbursements to also be used to augment FAC. Mr. President has also approved that the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning should engage with the Central Bank of Nigeria to agree on a debt and interest moratorium for states and for the federal government on CBN-funded loans in order to create fiscal space for the states and the federation. Accordingly, once average monthly receipts fall below a specific threshold that we and the states will determine, the interest and capital repayments will be suspended till a healthy path is attained. The details of the moratorium will be worked out with the central bank in partnership with the states and the federal government with a view to submitting the final proposals for Mr. President's guidance and approval. The intervention is vital to create fiscal space for the states as well as the federal government to enable all of us deal more adequately with the health challenges and the economic impact of the crisis to the nation. In a similar vein, the Federal Ministry of Finance is also reaching out to multilateral organizations where we have borrowed externally, either for the federal government itself or on behalf of the states, to also negotiate a debt deferment or debt suspension. As a matter of fact, last week, we had a meeting with all the African ministers of finance. It's a virtual meeting, and we agreed to collectively ask for suspension of debt service obligations for 2020 and 2021. So Nigeria is not alone in this. All African countries have the same need. And the World Bank and IMF that were in the meeting indicated to us that this is possible, and we will be negotiating with them the terms of those deferrals. Let me speak to the meeting about what we are doing to ensure adequate supplies of essential food items and critical medical supplies, as well as appropriate stewardship of donated items and funds. The response to the COVID-19 pandemic and the impact of the 14 days lockdown will have significant impact on transportation, on distribution and availability of essential food items, medical supplies. Furthermore, the government recognizes the adverse implication of these extraordinary decisions on our market women, on farmers, on traders, and on small businesses. The Finance Act 2019 has fortuitously provided significant tax relief measures for micro, small, medium-sized enterprises. Corporate taxes for medium-sized enterprises were cut from 30% to 20%, while small and macro enterprises are completely exempted from paying corporate income tax. This tax relief will be invaluable for businesses in especially the large informal sector. For businesses that earn 25 million or less in a year, they will not be paying any company income tax. The Finance Act 2019 has also expanded the VAT exemption list for essential food items, for medical supplies, and other basic items that are critical in our efforts to address the COVID-19 pandemic. We deeply appreciate the overwhelming show of solidarity by public-spirited individuals and corporate bodies towards combating the COVID-19 pandemic through financial and material contributions. In this regard, the government recognizes its responsibility to put in place an adequate framework in place for collection, for management, as well as for reporting of these donations. Accordingly, the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning has already developed a comprehensive framework for the transparent management of these contributions. In the interim, Mr. President has approved the temporary restructuring of the Treasury Single Account in order to better mobilize cash donations from the generality of our people and from corporate bodies across the country. This is important for us to be able to create flexibility and to build a coalition with financial institutions while maintaining the sanctity of the TSA. So going forward, for the COVID-19 donor COVID-19 donor accounts have been opened, and these accounts are linked directly to the TSA. There will be transit accounts, and we will be negotiating a temporary sweeping of the donations into the TSA COVID-19 response account. The following banks have been approved for this purpose: Zenith Bank, Access Bank, Guarantee Trust Bank, United Bank for Africa, and First Bank. These accounts, again, will be linked to the TSA for ease of monitoring and reporting. We will be, in a few days, be issuing circulars and ministerial orders to ensure that charitable donations by benevolent Nigerians as well as corporates who indicated support or have already provided support for the COVID-19 pandemic, we want to ensure that your contributions as corporates are tax deductible. This is allowed as provided for in Section 25 of the Company Income Tax Act. We have announced earlier on that we will be amending the 2020 budget to bring it to current realities. The Appropriation Act for 2020 was based on certain fiscal assumptions which we have been compelled to revisit given the emerging economic realities. Specifically, projected oil revenues have significantly been affected, and that is to state that dated Brent crude price fell to as low as $19.12 per barrel. This is as at last week, Friday, 3rd of April, compared to the $57 per barrel that we provided for in the 2020 budget. Oil production in the 2020 budget year to date is within the region of 1.9 to 2 million barrels per day as compared to the 2020 budget numbers of 2.1 million barrels per day. And then again, this is information as at February. You recall that the activities in March has actually seen significant stagnation in the sale of our crude cargoes. We are therefore revising oil prices for 2020 to $30 per barrel and oil production to 1.7 million barrels per day. We have similarly had to adjust downwards our non-oil revenue projections, including various tax and customs receipts, as well as proceeds of privatization exercise. In this regard, the Budget Office is currently working to finalize the revised 2020-2022 medium-term expenditure framework and fiscal strategy paper, as well as an amendment to the 2020 Appropriation Act. The proposed amendment to the 2020 budget will provide for the COVID-19 Crisis Intervention Fund and other adjustments required due to the decline in international oil prices. We have also commenced engagements with the leadership and key committees of the National Assembly to discuss our plans such that once the Executive 2020 Amendment Budget is approved, is completed and approved, we shall expeditiously seek the requisite presidential and legislative approvals. Let me conclude by a few remarks. The emerging health and economic risks resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic and the decline in international crude oil prices pose significant threats to the Nigerian economy, to the Nigerian healthcare system, and even to national security. It also poses significant risks to the lives and well-being of our citizens. Accordingly, extraordinary measures are required as the situation evolves to address these challenges. We will continue to work closely with our colleagues in the Ministries of Finance, Budget and Planning, Trade, Investment, Petroleum Resources, Ministry of Health, the Central Bank, to pursue greater coherence and coordination of Nigeria's fiscal, monetary, as well as trade policies. During the difficult days and months ahead, there is a need for this coherence to be strengthened. The Economic Sustainability Committee, chaired by His Excellency the Vice President, will continue to coordinate our efforts and strategies as well as provide regular updates to Mr. President and subsequently to the nation. In closing, I want to reassure our citizens and residents that the federal government remains committed to working closely with the National Assembly, with the state governments, with multilateral organizations, with donor community, and with the international community at large to alleviate the suffering of our people due to the ongoing economic and health challenges. I would like to particularly appreciate the understanding and support that we have received from our development partners, especially the World Bank, the IMF, and the African Development Bank, as well as the Islamic Development Bank, in our efforts to grapple with the COVID-19 crisis. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, let me thank you for your time and your attention, and also assure you that we will continue to do our best and seek your continuous cooperation of the various measures that the government has taken and also more measures that the government needs to take to protect the lives and welfare of our citizens and also to stabilize our economy and enhance our national security. Thank you very much, distinguished ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, the Honorable Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning. Please, another round of applause for the Honorable Minister. Two quick notes, please. My name is Yunus Atanko Abdullahi. I'm the Special Advisor Communications, Media and Communications to the Honorable Minister. We would like to take questions from my respected colleagues from the media and other distinguished guests. But there is a note I want to put out. Immediately after the interviews, the questions and answers, the minister will not be unable to take press statements again from media. So let's try as much as possible to take all the questions. The minister is here. She's willing to take as much as possible. But immediately after that, the minister will not entertain further interviews. Thank you. Udo, Premium Times.
You said that Nigeria has applied to IMF for the rapid credit loan to the tune of how much Nigeria has contributed. Can you let us know how much Nigeria has requested from IMF?
Okay. Okay, yeah. Let's take your question.
Yes, Nigerian Tribune. Now, aside IMF, you also mentioned that the government is talking with other multilateral partners. Can we know how much comprehensively is government looking at? That's one. Two, you mentioned the Finance Act of 2019 or 2020, which granted tax incentive to small companies. But in this situation, big companies are also reeling. For instance, the media industry is reeling. We have not been selling, people are not buying, they are not outside, and so on and so forth. What is government also planning for other private sector operators to as palliative under this present circumstance? Thank you.
Yes, the lady in front, in black. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Raliat Adenekon from Classic FM. My question has to do with experts or federal, agric organizations actually calling for a way to mitigate the food crisis, looming food crisis. What exactly, specifically, are you looking at to actually ensure that the food crisis in Nigeria is actually resolved in such a way that we would have food sufficiency? Thank you.
I take one more and then the minister responds and then we go back. Yes?
Good morning. My name is Leah Katung Babatunde from NTA. And I would also want to add to the question my senior colleague Sonia asked. Sectors like the aviation, the skies have been closed, and also the exports industry. Is there anything at all for them? Are you considering that? And then secondly, the moratorium you're granting states, are they time specific? Are they time bound? And if the time elapses, what next?
Thank you. The Honorable Minister may wish to respond now.
Oh, I have to come back there. Thank you very much, Mr. Basi Udom. Nigeria has a contribution of $3.4 billion with the IMF, and we're entitled to draw up to the whole of that 3.4 billion, no less. We have, in the first instance, applied for that maximum amount, but in the process we will negotiate, so we might get the maximum amount or less. But that's the amount of our contribution with the IMF. And this is a provision that the IMF has made for every member country, that you can apply for between 50 to 100% of your contribution to the IMF. Again, this is a program that has no conditions attached to the to normal IMF programs, and this is not an IMF program. Up to date, we're told that up to about 80 countries, member countries, have applied to draw from their contributions to the IMF. Nigerian Tribune, we have requested from the World Bank $2.5 billion, from the African Development Bank $1 billion. Let me state that the requests we've made to the IMF, to the World Bank, to the Islamic Development Bank, to the African Development Bank are requests for the nation. So it's both for the federal government as well as for the state. So for example, the request to the World Bank, 1.5 billion is for the federal government and 1 billion is for the state. That's our request. But during the process of reviews and negotiations, that proportion could change. But the request we're doing is on behalf of the Federation to all of these multilateral institutions. Classic FM, I said in my speech that we're engaging the key ministries to work out the public works program as well as the intervention programs to meet the requirements of food security as well as to meet the requirements of the poor and the vulnerable within our society. The committee chaired by His Excellency the Vice President is going to be engaging specific sectors. So for example, we are going to be meeting with the pharmaceutical industries to find out exactly what their requirements is, because we realize that the requirements on a sector-by-sector basis could be unique. So we'll be meeting with the aviation industry, we'll be meeting with large food producers to design programs within this fund that meets their own requirement. We don't want to sit and assume that we know what they need and we just design it. And we have arranged, the Federal Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment has been tasked with arranging this interaction with some key sectors. We realize the aviation industry is really affected, so is the hotels and transportation, and there's eminent risk to food security. The President has approved drawings from the Strategic Greens Reserve. The Nigerian Customs had in its custody a lot of rice that has been seized, and there's 150 trucks of rice that is now being handed over to the Humanitarian Ministry for distribution to the states across the Federation. From Leah, I think it's the same question that you asked. I had said we're engaging sectors to know exactly what they will need the most. We don't want to go and say we're reducing taxes for corporates like that, because corporates are all different shapes and sizes. So some of the corporates, for example, the pharmaceutical industry, what they may want are fast-track processes to bring in materials to produce more drugs. We'll be giving them import duty waivers. We'll be giving them support to air freight their cargo, because as supply chains are broken across the world, there's a need to fast-track imports of materials that are required to produce drugs within the country. So we have to have those engagements to be more specific. Thank you.
Your name and your medium.
My name is Princess Ekwi Ajide of the Anambra Broadcasting Service. Actually, I want to go back to farmers. Recently, on Twitter, I saw a post where a farmer was calling for help, that he has 50 bags of cucumbers that are getting spoiled. So are there measures to help these farmers? Because at the end of the day, various farmers who are into perishable goods would have lost a lot. Do we have anything for farmers? That's my question. Thank you.
Okay. Yep.
Honorable Minister, my name is Shafiu Suleiman from Liberty Television and Radio. 2 questions. The first one, it seems to have skipped the question asked by my sister here regarding the looming food crisis. I want to know, while the government is mopping up resources to provide palliatives and support businesses, we have a comparative advantage in the area of agriculture that we need to invest in. How much is the government, pushing into the agricultural sector to support food production, especially in the midst of this crisis? And secondly, the most the pressing issue now at the moment is to cushion the effect of the crisis on the poorest of the poor and keep the blue-collar jobs floating. What mechanism have you put in place now to ensure that the target population is reached in due time and that monies don't end up in private pockets? Thank you.
I take the last one for this set and then come back to you. Go ahead.
My name is Victor Irele from Silverbird Communications. Honorable Minister, one would have thought that when considerations about palliatives were being considered, probably the private sector, who we are caught unawares, could have also have been considered in terms of ability to pay their workers and probably special grants granted to them, since many of them were not prepared for what we are, and we don't know how long we are going to stay with this lockdown. Why was the preparation of provision not made for the private sector?
Thank you. The Honorable Minister, ma'am.
Let me, first of all, take the question from the intellectual newspapers. When will April salary be paid? April salaries are paid traditionally when we do FAC. So immediately FAC is concluded, then there's funds to pay salaries. Anambra Broadcasting Corporation, yes, we do realize, and it's a great concern, that farmers' produce are getting spoiled because they can't move produce to markets. And that's why I said, that's why I said we are engaging the different groups and the different sectors and different sector ministers to design specific programs. This is not a responsibility the Ministry of Finance alone can handle. What we have done is being able to identify and pool the funds, and we have got approval on various buckets of how these funds will be used. One of this is intervention on a sector-specific basis. To be able to come out with an announcement of what the program is, we have to sit down, engage with the sectors, engage with the key players in the sector, including the private sector. Let me say to Silverbird that you said, is there support in terms of grants that will come to the private sector? We are organizing support for the private sector. The central bank has announced infrastructure fund for SMEs so that private sector can access these funds. The Afrexim Bank has announced $3 billion funds that is also available for the private sector. The IFC, which is a branch of the World Bank, has also got funds which is for the private sector. The federal government of Nigeria is not in a position, because of our fiscal space, to give grants to the private sector. What we're able to do is to make sure that they have access to financing, very low-cost financing, and also to direct the commercial as well as the central bank as much as possible to renegotiate and defer debt service obligations to provide more fiscal space to these businesses. In terms for Liberty, we do realize very quickly that there will be a challenge to food security, and that is why the agricultural sector is one of the key sectors that is going to benefit from this COVID-19 stimulus package. So there will be an agreement of how much will be for agriculture, but I can tell you that already there are some measures that have been taken. The President has has approved that the price of fertilizer be reduced from the current price of 5,500 naira to 5,000 naira, and that is a relief of 500 naira for each bag of fertilizer. This is a time in which the cost has actually gone up because of exchange rates that has gone up, and also because of scarcity, so the production cost is higher. So government is taking in the incremental cost of the producers as a subsidy, so that the fertilizer bag still goes to the farmer at 5 naira to the US, 5,000 naira per bag. Subsequently, there will be more measures that we'll take, but we have to make sure that the measures are taken to provide broader benefits. We don't want to rush and announce measures that will end up benefiting only a few of the segments. Our interest is to make sure that as much as possible, a lot of Nigerians are put to work, and a lot of Nigerians have liquidity in their hands so that they can increase to the consumption to help reflate our economy. So this is not something you announce in a hurry without consulting with the sector ministries and also without consulting with the key participants in the sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. We'll be taking the last set of questions. So let me see your hands. 1, 2, 3, Onyinye, 4. Let's start with Onyinye, please. Business Day.
Okay, Honorable Minister, Onyinye Nwachukwu from Business Day here. Just wondering, can we get a sense of when the funds that we expect from the multilaterals will likely come in?
Next, yep, the lady.
Good morning, Minister. I'm Olatukewa from Kiss FM Radio. The first one is a plea. I would like government to also look into the orphanage, those in orphanage homes, in the part of the package that is going to be going out, because those in orphanage homes are not getting any palliatives. So I'd like government to also look into that. Then secondly, the last stimulus given, incentive given at Kwali by the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, we discovered that the money was given in cash. And according to CBN, they said even this coronavirus, COVID-19, can be transferred through cash. And then we are also promoting the cashless policy. I don't know why that is not being done. Then thirdly, too, I also like government to also look into the stimulus package given by some states. There's a state in the West that they were actually throwing bread from the local government across to the people. We see what they are giving in Western worlds. I would just like government to also talk to the state. There should be a standard in whatever we are giving to actually help people in this period. Thank you.
Okay, yes.
Okay, I'm Chris Agabi, I write for Daily Trust. I just want a bit of clarity, Honourable Minister, on the. You mentioned that some of these contributions from private sector donors could be taxed. So I just want a bit of clarity on that assertion.
Okay. The last question now. The man on the right, yes.
My name is Dayo Omogun. I report for Sharp Edge News. Now, the Honorable Minister talked about 1,000 jobs about to be created for all the local governments in the country. First of all, how soon are these jobs likely to come on stream? And secondly, what measures are being put in place to ensure that there's transparency, that ghosts, that the payments meant for those jobs do not go to ghosts again?
Well, business day, when will the multilateral funding come? Our assessment is this could take anything, the minimum period is 6 weeks. Because we made our request, we have to go through a number of processes, and also they also have to go through a number of their own internal processes, so an average of 6 weeks. The fastest from our assessment will be that of the IMF, because this is a predetermined fund. They have already a criteria set for every country. And then we will be pushing the World Bank and the African Development Bank to make sure that within 2 to 3 months, these funds are realized. And it's also in our interest that the funds come in stages so that we'll be meeting the needs as the funds are coming in. Let me assure you that the Ministry of Humanitarian Resources, who has under it the responsibility to take care of the poor and the vulnerable and people with disability, will also be considering orphanage homes, and they will not be left out. The distribution that was done last week in cash, we have all agreed is not sustainable, but I think it's something they wanted to do because there was an emergency. The nature of the announcement of the lockdown came suddenly on some of these 3 states, and therefore they decided to do that cash distribution. Going forward, this stipends that will be given, as much as possible, will be provided for through bank accounts or through telephone lines. And we're still trying to work out between the banking system and the telecom industry how best to do that. The distribution of monies by cash is not sustainable, is fraught with a lot of risks, and also it can be counterproductive. We note what you said about the states. We will encourage all of us, both federal and state governments, to provide not food that is cooked. If we distribute anything, it should be grains, food that people can cook themselves in their homes, not foods that will be. But our intention is to try to support people to work. That is why the public works program is very important, so that people earn and then they decide how they spend their money. Daily Trust, the private sector donated fund, we need to track those funds separate from the spending of the federal government. When we say tag, we hope to be able to clearly define that this project is done by private sector funds so that there is visibility. We have opened accounts where funding can be donated by both the corporate as well as individuals, and we have separate accounts even for public servants' donations. So we want ministers, the head of state, vice president, SGF, everybody has agreed that 50% of the salary should be donated to this response. The National Assembly has agreed a donation of 3 months of their salary, and these things keep coming in. So those funds also were put in a special account. We want to be able to say this is how much that has come from this group, and this is the project or programs that has been applied to it. So that's the essence of the tagging. We also are looking at putting in place an independent steering committee that will monitor the use of those funds, not the spending group is the the Presidential Task Force. The Accountant General Office under the Ministry of Finance keeps the fund in the TSA, but we want a different group, an independent group that will comprise of private sector and a few government officials to monitor the use of the funds on a continuous basis, and reports will be rendered to the public on a continuous basis. Our target is to ensure that there is complete openness about what has come in and how the funds are utilized. I think those are all the questions that have been taken. Let me use this opportunity to specially thank Channels TV and also TVC for broadcasting this program live, and also to thank all of our brothers and sisters from the media that have come to attend this press briefing. Let me thank you for the interest and the questions that you have raised, and let me also thank you for the education that you continue to provide to Nigerians to stay safe, in this time of extreme crisis. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning. The Honorable Minister have said it all. I don't need to add more, but I will want to thank my colleagues in the media on behalf of the Honorable Minister, the Minister of State, Permanent Secretaries, Director of Budget, and DG DMO. Thank you very much for coming, and please stay at home, stay safe. The copy of the Honorable Minister's press conference is being distributed now, and if you don't have place, as soon as this conference is over, you can get across to me and I will get it to you. Thank you. Let's end with the national anthem.